Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. So, Kant talks about this tendency to make exceptions, to break the rules. What we looked at before with the first formulation of categorical imperative, Kant was saying that morality has to consist in universal laws that are binding on everybody. And so that means they extend to all human beings. And actually, he would even go further and say not even all human beings, but all rational beings. So if you believe in, as medieval philosophers did, angels and devils, presumably they would be rational beings. They would be in a higher state of being. They were aliens that we ran across, and they were above the level of the merely animal. If they were like us in being rational, these moral laws should apply to them, whether they have tentacles or something in place of eyeballs or whatever. So this is a very, very high standard, and you might well wonder, well, wait a second, human beings don't actually obey the rules. As a matter of fact, moral laws are broken all the time. Think about, Kant says, lying, exceptionless. You should never lie. You should never deliberately misrepresent things. You should never conceal the truth from somebody. You're always doing something that's not universalizable in doing so. Or, if you use the second formulation, you're always treating somebody as a mere means by lying to them. So how is it then that we human beings, so often, if these are sort of universal laws that we're all supposed to be able to figure out by reason, why do we lie to each other? So Kant says that we have a tendency to, what he calls it, make exceptions. And here he's getting at something really interesting. When people make exceptions, they're not saying, hey, I don't think that morality exists at all. I don't think that everybody else can do whatever they want to. What they're usually saying is, everyone else they're bound by those moral laws, and me, I'll do it like this. Not so much. Not in this case. This is a special case. Or, I'm only doing it this one time. Or, well, if somebody really understood, my motivations, they wouldn't hold me to something so strict. But everybody else should still do the same thing. So if it has to do with lying, I say, well, I get to lie in this case, because this is a special case, and you got to understand the special circumstances of it. Or I'm the kind of person who can, judge when it's a good lie and not a good lie. All the rest of you got to tell the truth. I want you to keep on telling the truth. So that means that I'm recognizing, according to Kant, that there is a universal law discoverable by reason. I'm just saying I happen to be an exception to it. We can think of a lot of other examples. Think of people who cheat on their spouses and then find out that their spouse is, saying, well, screw it, if you're going to cheat on me, I'm going to cheat on you. And then suddenly they're angry at their spouse and they say, you did me wrong. And, you can look at them and say, well, you did the same thing, right? So how can you complain about it? Their mindset is that they expect everybody else to stick to the standards, and they make an exception for themselves. We could do this with stealing. We could do this with, we could even do this with imperfect duties, like being benevolent to other people. We talked about that with the first formulation. We'll look at it with the second. I should be benevolent towards you. I should, when I have the chance to improve your condition, your life, I should do so to, help out your quest for happiness.
and you should do so for me. But, if it's a bad day for me, then I don't have to do that. But all the rest of you should do that. As a matter of fact, it might be a bad day for me precisely because the rest of you aren't doing what I expect you to do. I'm not going to do it myself because I'm a special case. But the rest of you ought to. When we talk about hypocrisy is very often based in this common experience of people holding others to standards that they don't themselves observe, right? Think about development. All the rest of you should develop your abilities to the highest degree possible, because that's what you ought to do as rational beings. We saw this with Kant before. Now, if I want to lay around the house eating potato chips, drinking beer, playing video games, and sleeping in as much as I want, well, that's fine for me because I'm an exception. All the rest of you ought to be productive, healthy citizens of the society that's generating all these goods for me that I like. Do you see how this works, this mentality? I think we've all given into this too, haven't we? And when we know other people, and when other people do this, doesn't it drive us nuts? That's the funny thing about it. Kant doesn't actually get at this, but when we see somebody else doing this, we feel a sense of something being off kilter. How can you hold other people to these high standards that you are not yourself meeting? It would be sort of as if I were to, here'd be an example for classes. I'm going to assign you all sorts of reading to do. I'm not going to actually do that reading myself as the professor. I'm just going to assign it to you and then make you write reports on it. And you can teach me about it. You ever had a professor who did that sort of thing? We did. I did once. And again, inconsistency, right? So what is going on there? Kant says that there's a contradiction in our will in making exceptions like this. And what's the contradiction? We see that a certain principle should be objectively necessary as a universal law. So, and put it in very simple terms, we think that everybody else should be able to grasp, by using reason, that they shouldn't lie, they shouldn't cheat, they shouldn't steal, they should be nice to other people, all these sorts of things across the board, all these things that we consider duties. But subjectively, it should not be universal, subjectively meaning with me, the subject, but admit of exceptions. What's going on there? There's a contradiction. I'm willing something that is inconsistent. Notice, I am able to will inconsistent things. The will is free, so that's a possibility for us, right? We do it all the time, actually. But that doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it good, according to Kant. So he says, what are we doing? We're taking a universal law and we're reducing it to the level of the general. And his explanation for how this happens is we're introducing empirical considerations. We're introducing things that are not strictly rational, that every human being can agree to, but things that have to do with my own experience, my own, not only to be experience, but my own inclinations and desires. So there's sort of a higher order mix-up going on here. I'm saying that for all the rest of you, you should be following reason. And only reason in figuring out what your duties are and deciding what you're actually going to do. For myself, I get to take into account the things that are purely subjective, like my personal desires, which are not shared with you necessarily, or might be in competition with yours, and my inclinations. So do you all see how this works? It's kind of an interesting mechanism that Kant is explaining here. And I think it's very important to see how he can say that, yeah, a lot of people will look at things this way, but here's why their way of looking at it is screwed up. Does that make sense? Before I go on, do you guys have any questions about this particular idea or stance that he's taking? No? This is all clear?